just south of the Canadian border on the I-5 interstate. Washington State Trooper Mallory Baffa is on highway patrol.
I'm going to stop this vehicle because of the improper turn.
Washington is one of the very few places in North America where anyone over 21 can buy and use marijuana legally.
920 Everett stop. Rucker and 35th Street.
And on the roads, pot is keeping police busy.
So it smells like marijuana in the car. How much have you smoked today?
This night, with our CBC crew riding along, she stopped a 19-year-old man. He admits to smoking a single joint after work and then driving home.
How long has it been since your last joint?
He's upset and anxious and pleads for leniency.
I really don't want to lose everything right now. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm not trying to, give you a sad story or nothing.
No, I get it.
Please don't ruin my life. That's all.
But it's not going to happen.
So keep your head still. Follow the tip of my pen with your eyes only. Imagine a straight line in front of you. Put your left foot on the line and
He agrees to perform some roadside tests to determine his impairment. And then he agrees again to a blood test at a hospital, hoping by cooperating, he'll get off easier.
I do have to put you in handcuffs, okay?
Can I please just call my...
Hold on a sec, okay? Yeah, I'll do that for you in a second, okay?
Can I just grab my phone, please?
In a minute, take a deep breath.
Was he impaired?
Yes, he was impaired. He was under the influence of marijuana. I believe to be impaired by any substance and behind the wheel of a vehicle is not safe.
People who use marijuana don't usually overdose, nor do they become violent, but they do get behind the wheel and drive. From Washington's experience, impaired driving is probably the biggest public safety issue Canada will need to address when marijuana is legalized here. The challenge is deciding when someone is legally impaired. Exactly how high is too high to drive. At this Vancouver cafe, you'll find lots of pot smokers and drivers. How high is too high to drive, do you think?
It's different for a lot of different people. The first time you smoke, you shouldn't drive.
And you might even be too careful on the road after you smoke, to be honest.
Marijuana has been legal in Washington state since late 2012, and stores have been selling state-regulated and taxed products since July 2014, all professionally packaged and labeled.
Copy of your receipt.
The experience is a lot of people are buying those products, getting high, and then driving. This is Washington's toxicology lab.
We do all the driving impaired cases and death investigations for the state of Washington. So we do about 13,000 cases a year. About half of those are going to be driving related cases.
And increasingly a lot of them involving THC marijuana.
That is correct. So these are the blood samples that we end up getting.
Brian Capron is a toxicologist and he's the lab manager here.
The amount of people that are testing positive drivers is almost at 33% for THC. So almost 1/3 of our cases, driving cases that we get, 1/3 of those almost are positive for THC. Obviously the legalization started, I believe, in 2012. So we have had a sharp increase since then.
New at 5, prosecutors say a teenage driver admitted he smoked pot before the crash that killed his 3 passengers.
A grieving family had their chance to face the man who caused a horrible traffic accident when he chose to drive high on pot.
Fatal crashes where marijuana was present are up as well. In 2014, the number of drivers who tested positive was up 48% from pre-legalization. The test is for the presence of tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC. It's the active ingredient in marijuana that makes you high. Washington state law says that anything above 5 nanograms of THC per milliliter of blood means a driver is legally impaired. The measurement seems precise, but how impaired people are when they reach it can vary a lot.
An individual could be over 5 and a tolerant individual and may not be exhibiting any signs of impairment. And that's where the 5 is somewhat troublesome, because that level has not been shown in the science to be that one magical level where everybody is impaired.
The effects of drinking are much easier to measure and to predict. Most Canadian provinces consider either 0.05 or 0.08 blood alcohol content to be legally impaired. You can judge how many drinks it takes to get you there and be fairly certain how your body will react. Alcohol impairment has been studied for decades. Marijuana has not. And there's an urgency to know more. So we traveled to the University of Iowa.
It's where the rubber hits the virtual road.
For the last few years, researcher Andy Spurgeon and his team have been getting drivers high on marijuana and then testing them.
Then turn left at the intersection.
The goal was to make it as naturalistic as possible, as real life scenario as we could. And so we start the person in downtown at night, like they're just leaving a bar.
This is a national advanced driving simulator, and there's nothing else as sophisticated anywhere in North America.
Let's go for a cruise, absolutely.
We got to go for a virtual spin without drugs or alcohol, and after a few minutes, you totally forget you're in a simulator. It's that realistic.
This is intense.
Drive.
Which is important, since testing stoned drivers on a real road with other cars and people obviously isn't safe.
That's some heavy shit, man.
In spite of what you often see in the movies.
Am I driving okay? I think we're parked, man.
It's always funny in a movie, but there's a lot of things that are funny in a movie that aren't funny in real life.
When you look at causes of death and causes of disability, this is critically important.
The Iowa researchers got some subjects high, others drunk, and others both high and drunk, and then watched their every movement. The results confirm what a lot of pot users have always said, that they drive slower.
The drivers were driving slower under the influence of THC for longer periods of time, whereas with alcohol what we see is an increase in speed.
Slower, though, doesn't mean safer. Here, this high driver was going under 25 miles an hour in a 55 zone. The simulation videos show the high drivers were different in a crucial way from the drunk ones.
They were able to keep the vehicle in the lane more often than what drivers are under the influence of alcohol.
Applied with alcohol and marijuana, this driver veered off the road twice in 30 seconds.
So someone looking at your surveys and looking at your results might conclude, well, high drivers are safer than drunk drivers.
I don't think we can say that. You know, it's apples and oranges. It's two very different drugs. It's two very different time course in terms of impairment.
Researchers were also struck by how the same amount of marijuana got some drivers far more stoned than others.
Where are you coming from tonight?
There's still no reliable breathalyzer device for marijuana. The young man we saw arrested that night off the I-5 had to agree to go to a hospital and have blood drawn there to know how much marijuana was in his system. A single joint could put someone over Washington's legal limit, but critics argue the presence of THC, even a lot of it, does not mean you're impaired.
I feel I'm a safe driver and I drive a lot.
Allison Bigelow lives just south of the Canadian border, and if her blood was tested now, in all likelihood, she could be arrested.
I've used cannabis for quite a long time now in my life, and I use quite a lot of it actually. I smoke when I wake up and I smoke through the day. Come on, run, go!
Bigelow has chronic back problems and says the pot eases her pain. A few years ago, she was arrested for impaired driving. Her lawyer felt the DUI charge was unfair, so he got a doctor to independently check the THC levels in Bigelow's blood long after her last toke.
My last toke was at midnight, and then the next day I drove down to Tacoma where we were having the test done, and at about 10 in the morning, so it was about 10 hours, I was like 12.5 nanograms when I woke up without medicating.
That's over 2.5 times the legal limit without having smoked.
What did you learn from that?
Basically that unless I change my medication habits, which have allowed me to be able to still work and be an active person, then I won't be able to drive legally in our state because I'm not going to be below 5 nanograms at any time.
Her story isn't unique. Medical marijuana patients argue setting a THC limit could turn them into criminals again. There are dangers, though, with legalizing marijuana and having no impairment threshold.
I'm scared to death. We had a government that based their platform on legalizing marijuana and never mentioned safety once.
It's funny, after this many years, I remember these running shoes and things like that when he was wearing them.
Every nuance of Greg Thompson's life has been defined by the issue of marijuana and driving.
And these pictures here actually were taken by a classmate of his, and she gave those to us after the fact, after the crash, so that we had them.
It was late June of 1999. 18-year-old Stan Thompson, his son, was part of a group of teens who'd driven in 4 cars to a high school wrap-up party near Perth, Ontario. After stopping at McDonald's at 1:07 in the morning, one of the drivers tried to pass the other cars and smashed head-on into a pickup pulling a trailer. The collision caused debris to fly into the other cars, killing Thompson and 4 other teenagers. The young driver, who survived, had smoked marijuana heavily before the crash.
It's indescribable to bury a child. After 17 years, and I'm a reasonably well-educated man, I couldn't find the words right now to explain it to you. I couldn't. Here's how I characterize the challenge we have with drugs and driving and alcohol, okay? Is we are today with drugs where we were 25 years ago with alcohol. That's how far behind the curve we are.
Hi there, Counterattack, looking for impaired drivers tonight. Anything to drink at all?
Thompson says Canada should go with the same 5 nanogram THC limit for legal impairment because despite its flaws, that threshold conveys a public safety message and it gives courts important guidance.
Build a countermeasures policy. Get that in place before you entertain legalizing. I think it's just the only moral thing to do.
At the driving lab, the team acknowledges legalization is coming faster than researchers can provide the answers, especially on that crucial question of how high is too high to drive.
People want a bottom line.
They want a number.
Even though it's a gray area.
All right, so here's your bag. Walk with me and go to the front line.
The young man we encountered during our ride-along with the Washington State Patrol was released after he gave his blood. Incredibly, he even agreed to talk to us.
How did you feel when you were driving? Did you feel like you were safe to drive?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It don't make me feel any different, you know. After a long day at work, it's just something that calms you down.
And did you feel you were a threat to anyone else on the road tonight, or that you were a problem?
No.
His blood test won't come back for a few weeks, but since he's under 21, the legal age for using marijuana, he's not allowed to have any THC in his blood at all. He could lose his license. The DUI conviction will stay with him for his whole life. Canada is just beginning to consider its rules for legalized marijuana. A lot of people in this country know all about using pot, but a lot less about how to regulate it safely. Chris Brown, CBC News, Vancouver.